Mr. Razdan, good having you. Thanks so much for joining in. You obviously read whatever has come in the media, assuming that what has come on the channels and in the paper does turn out to be true tomorrow, or at least 50% or 60% of it does turn out to be true. How crucial could these state of reforms be?
I think, you see, the discoms have been begging for improvement and action for the last many years. You've seen that we've had a slew of measures to overcome this problem of debt. In 2002, we had the first exercise. Thereafter, you see, we had the the Electricity Act in 2003, which set to reform the whole system and break them into entities and form the regulatory commissions, which were supposed to take over, I should say, the tariff setting and also, I would say, some governance of the crucial governance of the sector. But then again, we had in 2012-13 an attempt to tide over the very bad debt crisis that was looming over the sector, and each time, you see, it's threatened to shake the financial sector. That, I think, has pushed government into action. But the fact remains that I think the governance in the power sector is a major cause of worry, because what is actually happening is that we had, you see, transformed these entities into independent distribution companies with a regulatory commission, and they were mostly state-owned, where the problem still persists. So I would say, first of all, it's a huge management failure in the distribution companies. Unless that is fixed, this problem will not abate to any substantial extent.
Sir, allow me to come in.
Second is a regulatory apparatus. Yes, please.
Sir, allow me to come in. Just for the sake of the paucity of time that we have at hand as well, I just wanted, because you've handled such an important position in your tenure, in your career as well, I just wanted your opinion on what we believe could come in based on whatever little we are learning. We are learning that the takeover of discoms loans would happen by the state governments, and that naturally frees the discoms to actually take up more or enter into more PPAs as well. One, how realistic is this? And two, how beneficial is this if indeed this does get announced?
Well, I think you're right. You see, that was the kind of attempt in the 2013 exercise also, 12-13, when we had this exercise, but unfortunately it's very close to the elections. So I think that went bust. Now I think the government has acted at the right time. This will certainly, if this comes through, the discom space will become larger. They will be less stressed. But the cardinal problem, as I keep repeating, you see, unless we fix the discoms, bring about professional management there, we'll only be finding piecemeal solutions to the problem. We are talking of converting these debts into state-owned liabilities, which of course the state is the owner. But I'm not sure, you see, whether how much financial jugglery is possible, because if we say that these debts which are taken on to the state liability will not be treated, you see, as their liability, at least for 2 years or 3 years, whatever they take on, I'm not sure how much of it is going to be financially acceptable, because the states themselves are quite stressed. And this will be certainly a financial relief in the terms of interest liability coming down, because in 1 or 2 states it's been noticed in some analyses that their repayment liability is virtually, interest liability is more than what they're actually running into a loss, you see. 60 to 80% is probably lost in these recurrent interest liabilities. The government is very right in pitching its finger onto that point and reducing the interest burden on these discoms. But I would again repeat that unless we improve the financial management and the management control in these discoms, I do not see why the financial institutions do not come on board of these, I should say, endangered entities, Otherwise, they'll keep making losses. They must see to it that prudent decisions are taken there. The AT&C losses come down. The AT&C losses are almost stagnant. In fact, they've deteriorated in some cases. And the political masters are not allowed to interfere for political gains into the affairs of these commercial entities. Because how long can we keep finding fixes? These measures, I think, essentially, of course, as I repeat again, are to save the financial institutions, because they are going from bad to worse in terms of their loan book to these entities which are unable to pay. But of course, if they are relieved, we expect these distribution companies to sign more PPAs, because we have a lot of IPPs which are sitting without PPAs for a long time. Now that must be mandated also, that these distribution companies must sign up PPAs, and within a very short time. They shouldn't sit on these quotes and quotations, because that leads to all kinds of problems.
Right. I'm also going to, bring on board Vinayak Chatterjee from Feedback Ventures into the conversation. And Mr. Chatterjee, we were just speaking with Anil Razdan, and he believes that it's the financial feasibility of refinancing discoms which is the big question mark right now. Do you also believe the same?
Well, I certainly believe that this financial restructuring is just a palliative. It is just an interim measure to enable discoms to carry on with normal lives, subject to some very, very hard decisions being taken on discoms. So this is only a palliative, it is not a solution. And the real truth of discoms is that out of India's 53 discoms, 40 of them are chronically sick, and they're chronically sick for a simple reason. It is the political patronage from the local to the highest levels in a state that allows 60% of what is technically called T&D losses, but it's actually huge degree of commercial connivance, corruption and theft. And that is holding the country to ransom. So why don't we recognize that it is the political patronage of power chori in its many manifestations and seeped corruption in the discoms billing and collection methods that have led to this problem. This has been known by the union and state governments for over 25 years. So that my question to the senior bureaucrats and to the politicians is, what have you done about it? It is very convenient for the center to say it is a state's problem. And it is convenient for the states to say that to save your financial institutions and banks, bail me out again. But nobody is talking about some very hard measures, saying there is rampant corruption. It is one of the most embarrassing sectors of the Indian economy. It is holding the country to ransom. Power plants are operating at 59% plant load factor. Power cuts are there from 14 to 16 hours across the country. And we don't even recognize the amount of, the real demand that is unserviced. So it is, to my mind, more than GST, more than inflation. This is the biggest problem facing the country. So what is the strong measure along with the palliative of this 4 lakh crore bailout package, which is number 3? So let me just finish, please. 2002, there was these Montec bonds of a 10,000 crore bailout. People thought that was a humongous figure. Come 2012, we have a 2 lakh crore plus bailout. Now we are talking about a 4.35 lakh crore bailout. So is the taxpayer constantly going to keep giving bailouts from public money so that the political class can continue to give patronage to thieves who steal electricity and with rampant corruption? But let me stop here.
No. Well, so, I think both you are pretty much echoing the same sentiment, and I'll come to this. This is a very important point of discussion and maybe a scope for another debate as well. By the way, the images that you're seeing on your screen is the German Chancellor visiting the Bosch facility, and of course, PM Narendra Modi is there too. And this is an interesting one. Remember, a lot of German tie-up companies are very much in focus today. Bosch right up there, the last couple of days has been amongst the top nifty performers as well. We'll try and get you more updates as and when they start speaking. But gentlemen, returning back to the power discussion, and I completely take on board the points that you are making. But, for the sake of simplicity of people who are watching in this discussion right now, I'm trying to limit the scope of this discussion, not to what can be done, because a lot can be done, yes. but let's try and limit the scope of the discussion to what is being proposed and what kind of impact could this have, irrespective of whether it's the only or the right way or no. And Mr. Chatterjee, let me come to you before I get back to Mr. Razdan. The 2 or 3 things that are happening: the sovereign guarantee bonds by state governments, 2, the fact that if states default on the dividend payment to bond owners, part of the tax devolution fund would be used for the payment to bond owners. So in some way, states will now be owning up to to lapses that may happen. Is this a small positive?
It certainly isn't. I mean, the state is a 100% owner of the discom. Does it take financial jiggery-pokery to make them own up? I mean, this is a complete travesty of what real ownership is. From independence, the state is a 100% owner of a discom. And just to transfer the liability from a 100% subsidiary to the main corporate parent and say, okay, now you're responsible, is, I think, fooling ourselves. So it fools nobody. And then if the state can't service the bonds, many of them are going to queue up and say, give me a special package and roll over my debt. So the question really is, how long are we going to fool ourselves with this financial jiggery-pokery? I mean, it's all right if you want to bail out the commercial banks and reduce NPAs and keep the country credit rating and all that. That's fine. I understand now a 4 lakh crore package is another 7 years down the line or 5 years down the line. You will have another television interview where you will ask the question, this time the government proposes a 15 lakh crore bailout. What do you think of it? I think this is utter nonsense. I think the important point is bureaucrats at the center, the minister at the center, chief ministers and power ministers have to get back and say, what are you doing to prevent 60% theft in this country of our real resource electricity? And I have 2 suggestions. One is, there must be, the system is so steeped in corruption that it is impossible to reform it. Let nobody fool us into saying, state, with these financial figures of bailouts that we are going to reform the discoms. Forget it. From the lowest meter reader to the highest, it is steeped in corruption. And therefore, you need a bypass. There are 2 bypasses possible. One bypass is immediately unleash a program linked to the bailout package which says hand over distribution to the private sector under a licensing model or an input-based franchising model. Secondly, from many chambers of commerce, particularly CII, we have advocated at the highest levels, including the PMO and the PM himself, the creation of a national power distribution company. We don't have time to debate that today, which will effectively challenge the monopoly of the state discoms across many sectors. But I suppose that's a subject matter for a fresh debate.
It sure is. Mr. Razdan, I'm going to come to you for closing comments. Weighing, measuring all the pros and cons, what do you think we're going to hear from the government tomorrow?
May not be tomorrow, maybe in the coming days. We do expect the government to give its attention to this sector and proceed on the lines that have been discussed. But I think what is more important, and I agree entirely with Vinayak, that we need to fix the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is mismanagement of the distribution sector, political interference. And at the same time, I would say to a very large extent, it is a failure of the regulatory apparatus. The regulators have got themselves their security, they've got kind of limited hearings on very legal issues, but a large part of governance is in their hands. They must look strongly at the quality of service, the quality of management, which is going through at the moment, and I think which is weak. We must involve the financial institutions into the boards, bring about professional into the management boards, ensure security of tenures and accountability. Because unless that basic thing happens, I agree with Vinayak that we'll be rolling over by a factor of 2 or 3 every 4 or 5 years. And I think the time is now right, because the government has just come into being. It's about 1 year plus,
yes.
And I think they've got 3 or 4 years to find a political fix to the problem. And I think the intention is absolutely right and timely, but the methodology, sure, I think needs tweaking and greater accountability on the regulators also.
Sir, which is a fair point, and trust me, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this discussion right now are in agreement with both of you when it comes to this. But I have one final question, because of which I was trying to have this discussion today, and that is, while what can be done or what should be done remains in the realms of hope, what could happen tomorrow? And I just want one final comment from you, Mr. Razdan, is that the brokerage notes that we've read, the comments that we've read in the media, is that the measures that are being taken would probably improve the viability of power plants, because the discoms will now be able to sign more PPAs, so on and so forth. So from a stock market perspective, that is important, and which is why I'm asking this to you. Do you think that will happen?
I think, as I say, may not be tomorrow, maybe in the coming days, but I think it will be certainly a step in the right direction for improving the status of generating companies who will be able to put some more power into the distribution companies. And as I said, at the same time, the distribution companies need to use that power very sensibly and prudently, and not fritter it away with accumulating their losses. Otherwise, the problem will only multiply in the days to come.
Mr. Chatterjee, I'm sure a lot of people have heard your comments as well, and I thank you for being candid. Thanks so much, Mr. Razdan, for coming in and giving us your thoughts and being candid as well. Really appreciate you gentlemen taking the time out.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.